A false alarm causes panic on the streets of Paris as the country's prime minister warns of more terrorist attacks being planned. The leaders of Russia and the US come together in the face of terror at the G20 summit, raising hopes of forming a streamlined effort against ISIL. And also ahead this hour, the Syrian army continues on the front foot against Islamic State. We have a report from an airbase liberated by government forces after years of struggle. Just gone midday here in the Russian capital on this Monday, the 16th of November. From the team and myself, Ewan O'Neill, welcome to RT International. Paris remains a city on edge following Friday's terror attacks. A crowd of mourners who had gathered at one of the French capital's main squares, the Place de la République, panicked and fled after hearing what sounded like gunshots.
Charlie.
Hundreds of Parisians had come to pay their respects to the victims of the horrific events when sudden noises startled the crowd. Panic-stricken gatherers fled the scene, but police believe the false alarm was in fact firecrackers. Nevertheless, the threat of new terror attacks remains high, according to the French Prime Minister.
Nous vivons et nous allons vivre longtemps avec cette menace terroriste et avec, sans doute, il faut s'y préparer, de nouvelles répliques.
The Prime Minister added that the terrorist acts were organised in Syria. And French media has reported that a 27-year-old Belgian-born man sponsored the attacks. The ongoing police investigation, which conducted raids and made several arrests overnight, reportedly seized firearms and cash. Meanwhile, a police hunt is now underway for Europe's most wanted man, Salah Abdeslam. The suspect is 26 years old and was born in Brussels. He's one of three brothers believed to be among the attackers. Another of the siblings is reported dead. That's unconfirmed, however, while a third brother has been arrested. Another assailant was identified by prints taken from a severed finger found at the Bataclan Theatre. The 29-year-old Frenchman of Algerian origin had already been known to authorities as a high-risk potential radical. Well, police also say they found a Syrian passport near the body of one of the suspected attackers. Greek authorities have confirmed a man called Ahmed Al-Mohammed with the same passport entered Greece along with asylum seekers in early October. According to Serbian officials, he later crossed over from Macedonia. Serbia and Macedonia are part of the Balkan route, popular among migrants entering Europe. Over 500,000 people have passed through the region into the EU this year, and scores of them are believed to have entered unregistered. EU politicians and experts alike have long been warning of the hidden dangers associated with the migrants.
Evidence that ISIS are now using this route to put their jihadists on European soil.
When ISIS say they will use the migrant tide to flood Europe with 500,000 of their own jihadists, I think we better listen.
We don't want fingerprint.
There are some colors taking money from people and get them to Belgium with that fingerprint and to Germany with that fingerprint.
Refugees and migrants not willing to be registered, not willing to be fingerprinted, not willing to be photographed.
Well, following the Paris attacks, France is stepping up its security and border controls, and other European countries are following suit. But experts believe it could be too late, as jihadists may have already exploited loopholes in the EU's open door policy.
France has re-established its border controls and reinforced them within the state of emergency. And we want these measures to be implemented by other EU states and fast, because terrorists cross EU borders and exterior borders.
Paris changes everything. It cannot be that we don't know who is coming to Germany and what these people are doing here. This situation must be brought to an end by all means at our disposal.
How difficult is it for a thief to enter a house with an open door? This is the same situation we have in Europe now. We have the Schengen Treaty that is saying that we have to control our outer borders. We are not doing that. We have the Dublin Treaty which says that the member states should registrate the immigrants. They are not doing that. There are already thousands of immigrants in France, and among them is a number which nobody knows how high is it of jihadists. So the problem is much more bigger than just to close the borders now.
Well, we've heard that 500,000 people refugees are coming to Europe, the EU, this year. But 60% of them are coming from Syria and Iraq, where we know jihadists, Islamic State, Al-Qaeda types have been operating. Then having an open door policy without making checks is obviously going to make it a very dangerous policy in the sense that it would be very easy for terrorists to come in under the guise of being refugees.
The EU's open door policy has triggered protests in Austria. At least 800 people gathered in Spielfeld to voice their concerns over the refugee influx in Europe. At the same time, 200 supporters of asylum seekers staged a counter-demo nearby. Another rally was held in Scotland by groups protesting the Scottish government's agreement to take in a small quota of asylum seekers, with a number of pro-refugee supporters also countering the protest there. In the wake of Friday's carnage, world leaders have convened in Turkey for the G20 summit. It is now into its second day, with officials already setting up meetings in various formats. President Putin wasted no time while waiting for British Prime Minister David Cameron, note-taking for talks with his Russian diplomacy chief. But the meeting that has drawn most attention so far took place on the sidelines, that of President Putin and his US counterpart. RT's Eli Petrenko is in the host city of Antalya. He brings us more.
Obviously, what stood out among the many things happening on day one were the interactions between the Russian and U.S. presidents Vladimir Putin and Barack Obama. Until Sunday afternoon, it wasn't clear if they were going to meet at all. Well, they did end up talking during an entire lunch break, sitting face to face at a small table, and they talked for over 30 minutes. Judging by the intent gesturing, the conversation appeared to be quite intense, and also the rare get-together caught a lot of attention, with journalists and even delegates taking pictures of the two leaders. We don't know what exactly was said during this chat, but we understand that Barack Obama and Vladimir Putin agreed on a common goal of wiping out Islamic State in the Middle East. However, differences remain over how it should be done, including the involvement of Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian government in that process. But ever since the tragedy in Paris, we're getting more signals from Western leaders that they are willing to listen to the position laid out by the Russian side.
The cooperation between Russia and other countries, especially the United States, is so important also in this context. I mean, refugee crisis, not only for stabilization in Syria, but also for Europe as a whole.
Vladimir Putin is having plenty of opportunities to push for a united anti-terrorist front that Moscow has been advocating for a long time. This is completely unlike the G20 summit in Brisbane, where Russia got sidelined by politics. This time, Vladimir Putin is holding plenty bilateral meetings with the international leaders. What will come out of these meetings, we will find out during the final press conferences that will be held later this afternoon.
Well, political commentator John White says the situation hasn't changed in Syria, but the tragedy in France should now force countries to heed President Putin's calls to act as one against ISIL.
Vladimir Putin hasn't changed 1 inch and 1 iota from his stance. What has changed is the events and the enormity of these events, because IS has now clearly broadened out its war, a war against civilization beyond Syria and beyond Iraq, to engulf Europe and the entire world. And those who still follow this policy of treating Assad and IS as a comparison, or as comparators, or as an equivalence, they have to ponder this. The Assad government is not in the business of dispatching death squads to Paris to murder civilians indiscriminately, nor is it threatened to murder civilians in Moscow or London or anywhere else. That is the key difference, and on that fact alone must form the basis of a united front against this cancer that is a danger to the entire world at this point.